Welcome back, everyone, to the Star Wars Unlimited Jump to Lightspeed card review series. This is the Command Hero portion of the list, and if you're new here, I rate all the cards from 1 star to 5 stars. What do the star ratings really mean? 5-star cards, these are meta-defining core pieces. Think Triple Dark Raid, think Wrecker, Ruthless Raiders. If you're not countering these cards, you're in for a world of hurt, and your deck really doesn't function as a deck if you can't take down some of these combos that you're going to be going up against consistently. 4-star cards. These are just great supporting cards for their colors, and they allow their leaders to do something that not many other leaders can do. Think P38 with Django, being able to ping exhaust, or like Darksaber with Sabine, where if she gets a Darksaber Sabine off, hits you for 7, then, you know, it's pretty much just game over from there. 3-star cards. These are really good supporting cards for meta decks, but they're like teched in and out based on the meta. I think a really good example of this is Crafty Smuggler versus like Greedo, right? Against ping decks, you really want Crafty Smuggler because it can survive, whereas Greedo's better than Crafty Smuggler if you're not going up against ping decks because it can take out 5 health turn 2 plays. 2-star cards. These are just okay cards, sideboard at best, or like 1 and 2 ofs in main deck sometimes. I think of cards such as Look the Other Way or Concord Dawn Interceptors as 2-star cards. People may disagree that Concord Dawn Interceptors is maybe a 3-star card. Every time I've used it, it's not been that great. For me, it's a great example of a 2-star card. And 1-star cards, these are just forgettable cards. There's no reason to really run them in a deck. I think of cards like Second Chance or Vanguard Ace. Nien Nunb, a 1-cost 1/2 with some interesting text. He gets +1/+0 for each other friendly pilot unit and upgrade, which isn't that great of a card. Especially in Star Wars Unlimited, we want to be playing like 2 drops on turn 1 because we have 2 starting resources. So is the piloting effect good? Well, it's the same as his body text. The whatever it's attached to gets +1/+0 for each other friendly pilot unit and upgrade. And he's a +1/+2. And in Wedge, he's free. So I've been talking a lot about how it's really hard for decks to kill turn 1 or turn 2 4 health spaceships, which is true. It is really hard for them to do that. The thing about the other ships that I was talking about is it's just 1 card. So you play that ship out, it already has its stats, you don't need to combo it, it just is there. And the few decks that can answer this card, think like Waylay, think Power of the Dark Side, Merciless Contest, Ping Tarkentown could probably handle this if it's only like 4 health. Then you've 2-for-1'd yourself, which is something that you never really want to do. And in Wedge, you're playing the 2 cards to get the same effect, and that is just so much worse. Typically, if you run 2 cards to get a marginally better effect than you can with just 1 card, you're better off just playing the 1 card and then saving room in your deck for other just better cards than what Nien Nunb would allow you to do. He is a rebel, but again, I don't think the 1/1/2 body is that great, so the traits really aren't that relevant. So all that being said, he's best in Wedge, and I really don't think Wedge wants to play him because I feel like there's just so many other better pilots that you could be playing, like Luke Skywalker, Anakin Skywalker. I think Nien Nunb's a 1-star card. I really don't see him seeing play in Wedge. He might pop up here and there, but I just personally don't feel it. Next up is Luke Skywalker. So he's a 2/3/2, which is already playable stats. Typically, like I've said before, aggro stat lines want to have more health. That way they can't be as easily traded into by like control statted units. He's a Force Rebel pilot, so just being a 2/3/2 with some upside with the Rebel Force trait is really good and can see play in Sabine just as is. Without even looking at his piloting costs, I think he'd be like a 3-star card. But let's take a look at the piloting. So the piloting, I think Luke is one of the only pilots whose piloting cost is actually more expensive than his unit cost. So it must have a really good effect. And it does. If the upgrade would be defeated, and that's any way, if the unit gets waylaid back to hand and the upgrade would be defeated, Luke would go to the ground. If the unit is defeated, Luke would go to the ground. If Luke is confiscated, he would go to the ground. That is just amazing. He's a terrible card to be confiscated. You can't waylay the unit back up. And if you kill the unit, you still get your free Luke Skywalker. And then on the next turn, you can just claim and attack with him. So he's a really good aggro card, as well as being like a really good just control card and just a great card in general. Essentially, your opponent has to 2-for-1 Luke Skywalker, except if they bamboozle him. So only having one answer, it makes him just a very good playable unit in almost every single green-white deck. Play him as a turn 2, 3/2 at worst. At best, you get a +3/+2 that spawns a 3/2 unit on the ground when it dies. I can see that just being played in every single deck. One other thing, and I'm going to bring this up because we have a couple really good pilots in Green Hero, is that if you play a turn 1 2-cost space unit, on turn 2 you play Luke Skywalker onto it, and then let's just say that your opponent eventually on like 5 resources, they play a card like No Glory Only Results. They take control of the card Luke is attached to and defeat it. How this game works is they only gained control of the unit. They never gained control of the upgrade. And a lot of upgrades that we've seen up to this point have always said attached unit gains this text. That's why every time up to this point, you've seen like, okay, if I take control of this unit and I have heroic resolve, it says attached unit gains this ability. I control that unit, so I control the attached unit's abilities. In this set, we're seeing cards like Poe Dameron, who has its ability on an upgrade. We're seeing Luke Skywalker, who has an ability on his upgrade side. So those aren't controlled by the opponent if they take control of the unit. So if you No Glory Only Results the card Luke is attached to, Luke would come back on your side of the field exhausted because you would still control him. And if you eject him, it's also a similar effect. Luke can kind of get around his common counterplays. There's really no great answer for him. If you play him as an upgrade, you almost always will have to deal with him as a unit. Getting a 2-for-1 against a control deck on a unit, especially like a Rebel Force unit, is insane. So Luke is an easy 5-star card. There's not much else you can say about it. A Force Rebel upgrade that spawns a unit when it dies is just really, really damn good. And it can be played as a turn 1 play. 5-star card. Green Squadron A-Wing. This is a Rebel vehicle fighter. All of these extremely relevant traits, and it's a 2/3/2 spaceship in Green Hero. The reason why it's a big deal that it's in Green Hero is Green Hero was in serious need of early game good space vehicles. A lot of times you would see them like supplement their space vehicles in other colors like red or yellow. The fact that we just have a 3/2 fighter in space that's a Rebel makes Leia so much better, because now you can play a set 1 Leia deck and already have a couple good Rebel turn 1 plays in just her own color. So now, instead of being forced to play Leia Red, which directly competes with Sabine Green, she might be able to play like more mid-range style deck in other colors. This Phoenix Squadron A-Wing gives her access to blue, gives her access to yellow, so now she can make these Rebel decks that are fundamentally different to Sabine instead of just like a different flavor of Sabine. Like I've said before, a 3/2 stat line is more of like a control stat line, less of an aggro stat line, because it's easier for control decks to take out 2 health and 3 health on turn 1. Maybe you're gonna play like a mid-range Leia deck with this card. I just think it's a good card. I think there's not much to say about it other than more early game space that gives like Green Hero access early game good spaceships is just good. It makes the colors better. It's just a really solid 3-star card. So next up we have another really good early game space unit. Blue Leader is a 3-cost 3/3 Rebel vehicle fighter. So again, the same really good traits as the last card. This one has ambush. So even if you get arena dodged on turn 1, you play a battlefield marine on the ground and they go to space. On your turn 2 play, you can just play Blue Leader. It ambushes into their turn 1 play, kills it. Just that in itself is a good card. That would be a 3-star card. But Blue Leader has a couple other things going for it. It also has a when played effect. Now, this when played effect allows you to pay 2 extra resources when you play it, and you can move it to the ground arena and give it 2 experience tokens. So this allows for 3 scenarios to happen when you play Blue Leader. You play him on turn 2, paying 3 resources, ambush into a space unit, and that's all it does. Or if you have 5 resources, you can play Blue Leader, move it to the ground arena, give it 2 experience tokens, ambush into something on the ground. And lastly, ambush is a when played trigger. So as the controller, when you play Blue Leader, you get to choose how they resolve. So you can play Blue Leader, ambush into something in space, and then if it survives, pay the 2 resources to move it to the ground arena, and then you have like a 5 however much health left blue leader on the ground after killing something in space. So blue leader is one of the most flexible ambush cards in the game. Also, it being in green hero allows you to play this in Boba hero, and now it's ambushing for 4 in space and ambushing for 6 on the ground. And those are really, really relevant breakpoints. In space, like I've been mentioning, 4 health on turn 2 and turn 1, really hard for decks to deal with. Well, this gives Boba hero an option to do that. Also, on the ground on the 5 resource turn, we have seen 2 major leader stat lines. Typically, it's either 4-6 or 3-7. And they vary, but those are typically it. So if you're playing against a 4-6 flip leader, like Poe, you can play blue leader in Hero Boba, move it to the ground, ambush into the new Poe that flipped out, and blue leader actually survives with 1 health. So you assassinate a leader on its flip, and your unit gets to survive afterwards. It's just an extremely strong card in that regard. We've seen Plo Koon be played, which is a 5-cost 3-6 ambush with a coordinate ability that sometimes makes it 6 in Boba Hero and Quinlan Vos. It would then go to like 7 attack. But you don't always get that off. It also does have the force trait, which is very relevant as well. All of that being said, amazing traits, amazing flexibility, best keyword in the game, aggressive stat lines, synergies with leaders in its own color. This is just like one of the easiest 5-star cards I've seen. I think this is a 3 of auto include in every single green hero deck. Han 1 green would love this card. Leia loves this card. Sabine loves this card. Hero Boba loves this card, and possibly even Quinlan Vos loves this card because he can play blue leader, kill most turn 1 plays, and he kills most turn 2 plays with blue leader because you get the extra ping effect. It's a little bit trickier. You don't get like the ground buffs on most units, but blue leader, insane card, 5 stars. Leia Organa is a 3-cost 3-4 rebel official. So the rebel trait, extremely relevant, and she has okay stats with upside. She's kind of a weird mix of Sundari Peacekeeper and Fleet Lieutenant. She doesn't have as much restore as Sundari Peacekeeper, but instead of raid, she gets 2 attack already built into her, and she has 1 less HP. That might just be a wash. Her when played ability, with Fleet Lieutenant, you can target any unit. If it's a rebel, it would get the bonus. You typically only played it with like mostly rebels, so you built your deck around it, so you almost always hit the buff. That gave it +2/+0, where Leia only gives it +1/+0 and restore. It's less of an aggressive card and more of like a mid-range to control style card. I can see her being played in Wedge because you're throwing in a bunch of small pilots, so Leia's more likely to hit. I can see her being played in a Poe green deck because you always have Poe, which means that you most likely always have a pilot to play, so it's harder for her to miss. The restore is also really, really nice. So Leia being a 3-4 for 3 restore 1 rebel in some decks would already be better than Sundari Peacekeeper because the rebel trait is better than what Sundari Peacekeeper has. Like she would be like a 2.5 to 3-star card just without the when played text. But adding in the when played text, I think it makes her much better because green hero kind of has restore in its kit. It's not as prevalent as, let's say, blue hero. So the amount of restore and being able to restore 1 on her attack and her when played restoring 1 is good and relevant. I think if we see a Poe deck or a Wedge deck really doing well, I could see how Leia fits into it. The +1 attack, the restores, the competitive stats on the ground. I think all of those are really good things. And I think if we see like a Poe green deck, which is where I would personally put Leia, I think she would be a really big star in that deck. She would help you survive at key points against aggro decks. She's action efficient because you can play and attack if you have a pilot out. She's great. I think with Luke, Chewie, and Poe as a leader, I think you have a critical mass of pilots that Leia is likely to hit. I think she's a 4-star card. Snap Wexley is a 3-cost 2/5. As just a unit, we've seen that with a restore 1, and you give all of your other friendly heroism units +1 health, and that doesn't see play. Well, let's look at his abilities. So he has a unit ability, so when you play him as a unit and on attack, the next resistance card you play costs 1 less. That means that if you were to play a resistance event or a resistance upgrade, which we don't have yet but we could eventually. It wouldn't surprise me if they give us one. And as a pilot, it's a 2 cost. When played, you get to search top 5 cards of your deck, so it doesn't dig that deep. You would need to have kind of a lot of like good resistance cards that you'd want to hit, and you basically reveal it and draw it. He's a 3 cost 2/5. When played on attack, mana cheat 1 for a specific card, and if you need that card, you can play him as a pilot to like try and dig one out. My problem is I don't see where we have a critical mass of great resistance cards that would lead me to want to put in Snap Wexley so I can draw and try and grab them and like play them for cheaper, over just playing better cards and like waiting 1 turn later and not hitting like a super amazing card. The card that you would want to hit in the play line I would see that would be the best with this, you're in some kind of resistance deck with a resistance leader, you play Snap Wexley out on 5 or on your 5 resource turn, and then you attack with him on your 6 resource turn, and then you basically can play the Raddus for 6. There's just other ways to cheat out the Raddus cheaper than that. If you play They Hate That Ship, you just get a bigger discount, and it's on any ship, not just the Raddus. And I don't think the digging is going to be that great. I think Snap Wexley, like a +2/+2 for 2, draw a card maybe, and maybe the card is good, is like just okay. Maybe it's a little bit bad. The 3/2/5 stat line is not that great. You need an amazing effect like we see with tech. Discounting a resistance unit just isn't that relevant right now. So I think Snap Wexley is currently a 1-star card, but I'm going to put the caveat here. If we get a resistance themed, like heavy resistance themed set or deck or something in these next 2 years, Snap Wexley is one of the cards to keep your eye out for, because he can be really, really broken if we get a big critical mass of resistance cards. I just don't think we're there currently. He could be one of the key pieces that gets really, really good later on. One of the cards that could go well with Snap Wexley is Veteran Fleet Officer. So he's a 3/2/1. When played, create an X-Wing token, and he has the resistance trait. And collectively, that is a 4/3 worth of stats if you like add them all together. Now, we have seen a similar card. We have seen a 3 cost 4/3 Overwhelm card in set 3, and that card didn't see any play at all. Now, that's probably because the 4/3 stat line is not that great of a stat line. Let's say that your opponent on turn 1 played a 3 attack unit. If you put the old 4/3 down, opponent can just freely trade up, and you're like gifting them a resource, which is really, really bad. Now in set 1, and it does pop up from time to time, we do see 4/3 Sentinel, the echo based defender, that has this stat line, this cost, that sees play in these colors. The difference between that is a lot of times, and when it was played, we didn't have an early Sentinel in the colors, so you would play the 4/3 Sentinel down because it's all you had. Now, as more sets are coming out, we're getting more tools. We played it out of necessity back then. We didn't really play it because we wanted to, we were forced to. Veteran Fleet Officer is a little different because of because the stat line is split between 2 units. You have a 2/1 on the ground and a 2/2 in space. And we've seen that with, we've seen something similar with Batch Brothers. And Batch Brothers, I do think, saw a little bit of play. I think it was like a 2-star card. I didn't do ratings back then. I didn't have a YouTube channel back then. That could be really, really good. And the fact that they're in 2 different arenas is better than having both on the ground, because it's harder to answer in both arenas than in one arena. And if you're playing like a pilot deck, having an X-Wing token that you can pilot is really, really good. I'm living in a world where Tarkin Town and ping decks are like the king. And I really don't want to be playing a 2/2 and a 2/1 into ping decks where you play your turn 3 play, and then they play P38 and they just can kill your Veteran Fleet Officer. So now you've got a 2/2 X-Wing and they have a 3/2 Starfighter. So they got more stats and they have a win defeated. That's a ping. And if it's in Django, it can exhaust. Currently, I don't see Veteran Fleet Officer seeing play right now. If ping decks stop becoming as popular, or when Tarkin Town rotates next year, this is a card to keep your eye on, because a 3 cost 4/3 split among 2 arenas is a good effect. Just currently where we're at right now in the game, I don't think I'd want to run this. 1 star. Next, another card that does something similar to Veteran Fleet Officer is Poe Dameron. So he's a 4 cost 3/3. You're paying 1 extra resource to get +1/+2 in stats as a body. But he's kind of a 4 cost 4/5 in space, because when you play him as a unit, you create an X-Wing token, and then Poe may pilot any card, but typically like the idea is you pilot the X-Wing that you just played. He could be piloting a card that's readied and ready to attack. So in a way, he's kind of like a +2 attack to a readied unit if you want to put him on something else, something sturdier than an X-Wing token. In my opinion, a 4-cost 4/5 in space is like on the cusp of playable. We see Kanan Jarrus be played as like a 4-cost 4/5 restore like 1.5 with a force trait. Every time you play him, he's always just like, he's like the 50th best card in your deck. I feel like he's on the verge of being cut. And he even has like a restore effect, and he has a good trait. I would say he has a better trait than the resistance trait Poe has. What he doesn't have is the flexibility to be played on the ground and pop a unit into space. You know, Poe, if he wants to be a 3/3 on the ground and creating a 2/2, that's 5/5 worth of stats for 4, so that's a little bit better. And again, it's harder to deal with because a lot of the removal in Star Wars Unlimited is like 1-for-1 kind of overstatted, overcosted removal. The one thing that Poe has that's better than like Veteran Fleet Officer or Batch Brothers, if you ECL Poe, you can ECL Poe, hit something that has 2 attack, then create the X-Wing token, and then pilot it. So Poe can go in, deal 3 damage, and then pilot something and create a 2/2. He's like an amazing ECL target, only if you're ECLing something that has 2 or less attack. That's kind of good. Like that would bump him up from like a 1 to 2 star rating to like a 2 to 3 star. Like that would give him like half or one star. But he also has one other really cool thing. In Young Han, use Han's ability to deal 2 damage to Poe playing him. So he's a 3/1, he creates an X-Wing token, and then you pilot that X-Wing token. So now you essentially got a 4/5 in space on turn 2, which is so much better. We're seeing a 4/5 in space on turn 2 that has like this really terrible when defeated effect that your opponent gets to like take it and be able to play it for free against you, and then like you pass it back and forth. Outside of a few certain decks, that card probably won't see that much play because you would want to blank that effect or deal with it somehow. Poe just kind of gets that in Han too. Now, again, when I'm creating decks, it's, do I like the colors, and can my leader do something really cool that gives him an advantage over other leaders? That is adding to Young Han's arsenal of like cool tricks that he can do. Does that make Young Han playable? Right now, he's kind of hard to say because you really don't want to be damaging your own units when you play them, because currently, and I know I keep harping on this, you're basically giving free Tarkin Towns to your opponent. But Poe essentially is like negating that effect. So I really like him in Young Han. I think he's really cool in ECL decks. The 4 resource, there's not that many things that you're going to want to like ECL out or timely intervention out into and then pilot that you're going to like get the value of a kill and then moving him over. And if you just play him and like use him as a pilot on the X-Wing that you played, he's kind of just like meh. I don't think he's like that broken or that great. I would give Poe 3 stars just because he has the interaction with Young Han. He has the interaction with ECL. He's got the playing a token. So if you're going up against like a control deck, you can leave Poe on the ground, play an X-Wing in space, and now you're kind of a pain in the ass for them to deal with. So he's got a cool things. He's flexible. I just don't think he's a blowout card like I initially thought. Just a big old pile of stats in space, especially in a space heavy themed deck where there's going to be a lot of big spaceships that can just ram into him. All he did was just be a big 4/5 meatball. Is a little too slow in my opinion to be anything better than like a 3-star card. In Young Han though, if Young Han Green really takes off this set, Poe Dameron's a 3 of in that deck, I'm sure. A 3-cost 4/5 in space is just an insane stat line that we haven't seen, or that we've seen with like a big downside. So Poe Dameron, 3 stars. Red Leader is a 4-cost 3/4 rebel vehicle fighter. Those are all good traits, and those are like on curve stats for this set. And Green Hero is in dire need of some vehicles. Looking at Red Leader's effects, if you have pilots out, it costs 1 less for each pilot unit or pilot upgrade that you have on the field. So technically, this could be a 0-cost 3/4, and then it would be really good. It has a secondary effect. When a pilot upgrade attaches to this unit, you get to create an X-Wing token. So I guess the idea here is you would play Red Leader on 4 resources for 4, saying you have no pilots out, but you could pull it out sooner or cost 1 less or whatever. And then on like Wedge's flip turn on 5, you flip Wedge onto this, and then you can attack and you get an X-Wing, and then your next pilot you play costs 1 less, so you can pilot it onto the token that Red Leader makes. So now you have this big heavy space armada on 5 resources. I just think there's going to be so many other space synergies that this really isn't gonna be that great. The cost reduction, while good, I just don't see it being that game breaking. If you have 3 pilots out and you have the ability to play Red Leader, aren't you already winning? I think Red Leader is like a win more card. Realistically, if you're looking at Red Leader, you're gonna have reliably, let's just say, 1 pilot out at a time. So then Red Leader just becomes a 3 cost 3/4, which we already are seeing 3 cost 3/4s. So in that regard, I don't think Red Leader, like the mana cheating doesn't get you past like a stat threshold. I can see the potential. I think Red Leader is just a 2-star card. It doesn't blow me out of the water. It has good traits. I do think this is one of the cards that I could be getting very wrong, because I'm valuing Wedge kind of lower than I know a lot of people are. If Wedge is like broken and cracked, Red Leader probably fits into that deck pretty well. I just think Wedge is like a tier 2.5 deck, not really like a tier 1.5 or tier 1 deck. So Red Leader, 2 stars. Next up, we have Resistance Blue Squadron. So this is a 4 cost 3/4 resistance vehicle fighter. The resistance trait is worse than the rebel trait, but let's look at its effect. So its effect is, when played, you may deal damage to a unit equal to the number of friendly space units. So we have seen this effect on 2 other cards, or like a similar effect on 2 other cards. We saw this on set 1 Akbar, and we saw this in like an event in set 3. The problem with both of those effects is that the damage you're dealing to a unit is equal to the number of friendly units in that arena. This card is easy to build around, because if you're playing a heavy space deck, you just play in space. If you have 3 space units out, it doesn't matter if they're on the ground. You play this and you can deal 3 damage to a unit on the ground. Now that is a lot better than picking an arena and having units in that arena, because if you're trying to like race a Sabine, if you're trying to play in space and they have a threat on the ground you need to take care of, then you don't have to like commit to the ground to kill the unit. You can get removal from space onto the ground just by playing in space. So that's really, really good. This card, notably, is also really, really good in U-Wing reinforcement. If you pull out something like Resistance Blue Squadron and a Blue Leader, play Resistance Blue Squadron, you get to choose how the when playeds go off. So you get your 2 space units, you deal 2 damage to something in space or on the ground, and then you can ambush in with Blue Leader in the arena if you have the 2 extra resources. Like Resistance Blue Squadron and Blue Leader can deal like 5 damage out of U-Wing reinforcement in space. That's pretty damn good. And if you're playing it in like a Boba deck, it's 6 damage in space with just those 2 cards, which notably will kill something like Fett's Fire Spray, which they could have played the turn before, or it could kill something like Ruthless Raider. I really like this card a lot. I think it's so much better than Red Leader because you get an effect that your deck can build around. It's better to be pulled out of U-Wing reinforcement. It's good to be pulled out of Home 1. This card is just kind of... We've seen the Akbar effect be used from time to time. I think this card, while it's not as cheap as Akbar, which matters, you can still get the effect if you just keep playing space units and then kill something. Resistance Blue Squadron has a lot of synergy in just like the green hero colors with U-Wing and Home 1, that I think it's a 3-star card. I think it can see play. I think you're going to see it come in and out depending on what you need to do. Like Django's running a lot of 2 health units. If you can, U-Wing reinforcement, or if you have like a tapped unit because Django's going to like tap your X-Wing token, you play Resistance Blue Squadron, you deal 2 damage to their P-38, and I mean, you got to when played kill something. That's pretty damn good. So Resistance Blue Squadron, I think, is a 3-star card. Next, Chewbacca is a 5-cost 5/6 Rebel Wookiee pilot with the text, "This unit can't be defeated or bounced by enemy card effects." That alone is probably playable. The fact that a lot of the removal in this game is like defeat or bounce based, which means this card kind of negates a lot of its counters already. It can't be Fell the Dragon, it can't be Rival's Fault, it can't be Waylaid. So those are all really, really good things. So that means Chewbacca as a unit would also wear upgrades really well. If you give him something like Electro Staff, or if you DL 44 Blaster on Chewbacca, then like he's really, really good, and that upgrade gets better because it's harder for them to kill the unit it's attached to. So that's probably like a 3-star card right there, just a unit that you can throw down if you're like slightly ahead, that then they have to answer or they just keep getting beat down by it. The thing about Chewbacca is he has a piloting ability. So for 3 resources, which is turn 2, which is really early, you can just attach him to a vehicle and give it like the same text. It can't be defeated, can't be waylaid, and it gets +3/+3. So Chewbacca is kind of like a mix between 2 cards that we've seen already. I thought Shadowed Intentions was going to be nuts. It was a 3 cost, so the same as Chewie's piloting ability, +0/+0, and it said something similar like this unit can't be defeated or returned to hand by enemy card effects. Turns out spending like a whole turn 2 just to give like a small unit a slight benefit, you know, you could just ram into it with your turn 1 play, or you ambush into it on turn 2, and it's kind of just like it got killed and you wasted your turn. You're now behind. Hey everyone, so this is editing mode here. I was putting in the graphics for the video, and I had, you know, Chewbacca up, and I was putting in Shadowed Intentions, and I was like reading to myself what they do and how like they're 1-to-1 copies, but they're not. So if you read Chewbacca, it just says this unit can't be defeated or returned to hand by enemy card effects. Shadowed Intention says this unit can't be captured, defeated, or returned to hand by enemy card effects. And I just completely forgot that capture was like a mechanic, because it's not prevalent at all in the game besides set 3 Cad Bane unit. And I just wasn't even thinking about it. But there are 2 cards that you might be able to play to take care of Chewbacca on turn 2 kind of reliably that is just better than what I've seen so far. You can play Take Captive. A friendly unit just can capture an enemy non-leader unit in the same arena. So if you play a space unit, they play a space unit, and then they pilot it with Chewbacca, you just take captive their space unit, and you've defeated Chewbacca, and you've essentially like exhausted their space unit at worst. If you're playing yellow, you can just play Relentless Pursuit. You know, you choose a friendly unit, and all that needs to happen is that unit the same or higher cost than the unit Chewbacca is piloting, and it has the bonus text. If it's a bounty hunter, you can get a shield token to it. So these are 2 cards that, like, when they play Chewbacca, they might not be expecting it, and you can just play it, defeat their Chewbacca, essentially, you know, exhaust their unit that they attached it to, and you kind of like get tempo with it, which could be pretty good. If you don't want to run like confiscates and you're not playing red, so you don't have access to the disabling Fang Fighter, these could just be 2 other options that you might want to consider, including in your deck. So don't forget about them like I did, and we'll continue on with the video. With Chewbacca, the +3 health really matters. If you have something like a Green Squadron A-Wing with 3 health, you put Chewbacca on it, now it has 6 health. It's going to be extremely difficult to kill. Most of the answers that I can think of will just not work on Chewbacca. Counters I'm already starting to see is people playing things like Kylo's TIE Silencer and then entrenching their own TIE Silencer to then ram into a 6 health unit on turn 2 just to kind of stop Chewbacca. This is also where you're going to see confiscates come out. You're going to see a lot of upgrade hate on Chewbacca, but you can play around it with Chewbacca. The problem with like Shadowed Intentions was if it ever got really good, then people would just run upgrade hate and you're screwed. With Chewbacca, if they run upgrade hate, just play him as a unit to the ground. Notably, one thing I want to say about Chewbacca is when it's defeated, you can bring it back out with home 1. You can only bring it back out as a unit, not a pilot. So don't think that you can, you know, kill Chewbacca, play home 1, and then with the 3 cost reduction, be able to instantly pilot home 1 with Chewbacca. That would be absolutely broken, and it doesn't work that way. A couple notable counters with Chewbacca is things like no glory only results. Since it takes the unit Chewbacca is attached to, then kills it, it's no longer an enemy card ability. It would be a friendly card ability. So in that case, it would die. Damage effects like indirect damage or hits Chewbacca. So that's kind of a way to play around it. I just think you're going to lose games because turn 1, they play Green Squadron A-Wing. Turn 2, they pilot it with Chewbacca. You didn't draw your confiscates. You only have your ground units, and it just keeps hitting you in the face. And by the time you deal with it, you're already at 14, 18 damage. And now they're flipping their leaders out and playing their big cards, and you're already too far behind that you can't catch up. And the +3 health with Chewbacca really matters. We see Lurking TIE Phantom be a 2/2 raid 2. But there's so many effects in the game that give it -2/-2 or can deal 2 damage so early on that it's so fragile and it just kind of dies. The +3 health that Chewbacca gives is so crucial, and that makes Chewbacca a 5-star card. I think Chewbacca is insane. If Chewbacca was just a 3 cost plus like 0/3, I think he would already be insane. The additional attack is crazy, and this is the reason why upgrade hate is going to have to run rampant through the game right now. because Chewbacca, if unaccounted for, just instantly wins games. He's going to be insane. So Chewbacca, 5 stars. Next up, the Raddus. So it's a 7-cost, 8/6 resistance vehicle capital ship with the text, while you control a resistance card, typically you're going to be playing this with a resistance leader, it gains Sentinel, and it also, no matter what, has this when defeated ability, deal damage equal to this unit's power to an enemy unit. So in card games, the circle of life is essentially mid-range is really good against aggro decks. Aggro decks are good against control decks, and control decks are good against mid-range decks. That's kind of like the circle of life. Well, the Raddus directly counters a lot of Control's popular cards. It kind of counters Relentless. It counters Avenger. I really was high on the Raddus, and I also really like Blue Hero. So I was like, oh, I'm going to play the Raddus with Rose. But then they released another card, and they released They Hate That Ship. And with They Hate That Ship, you can actually pull the Raddus out on the 5 resource turn, which, yes, I know it's a 2-card combo, but in a Poe deck, which is where I would see this being run, you play They Hate That Ship, you get the Raddus out, and then you can flip Poe on the same turn. So you have an 8/6 Sentinel in space with a really big when defeated effect, and you have a 4/6 leader on the ground. That just seems like a really big swing turn that's going to really trip up a lot of opponents' decks, and that's why I'm like kind of more high on the Raddus than the other people that I've seen review cards. Poe Green, it's one of the decks I'm really excited to play, and I think the Raddus fits in really nicely in the way that I'm currently formulating that deck to be. I haven't been able to test it that much because Carabas doesn't have They Hate That Ship implemented. Do not sleep on Poe Green with the Raddus and They Hate That Ship pulling this puppy out on turn 4. All that being said, I don't think I'm going to play this in like a Rose deck. I think there's so many other things that you can do with like Blue Hero. You don't need to play Rose. The Raddus is a 4-star card. So the Starhawk is a 9-cost, 6/9 capital ship with ambush and this really amazing text. While paying costs, you pay half as many resources rounded up. The ambush is nice, except at this stage in the game, you're not really going to be hitting like the things that this can kill, like Fett's Fire Spray and Ruthless Raiders. Most likely they're going to have Avengers and Relentlesses out, and you really don't want to hit those because you don't kill it, you take 8 damage back, and it makes this like more susceptible to removal. In Green Hero, there are 3 issues with this. Issue 1 is that this is a combo piece. So you have to play the Starhawk down on 9 resources, hope it lives, and on the next turn, hope you have the cards in hand that you can just start slamming down and getting great value out of this. That's problem 1. Problem 2 is there's no way to like protect this besides like Chewbacca. But again, you have to play it down. You have to hope it doesn't get removed. You can play Chewbacca on it, but then it can still take a bunch of damage. Just okay protection. And the last thing is the text, while paying costs, you pay half as many resources rounded up, only comes into effect on your next turn. When you play the Starhawk down, you have to hope it lives, and your opponent is probably going to have some form of removal that it can just take care of the Starhawk. So in Green Hero, I think the Starhawks is just like a 1 to 2 star card. I don't think it's that broken. Let's treat the Starhawk as a 10-cost green villainy card because it is a capital ship, which means it can be played in Piet for 10. Let's take another look at the 3 issues that I had with the Starhawk. Issue 1 was that this can easily get removed at this stage in the game. If you're playing Piet, you're already playing a bunch of these big ships like Relentlesses and Avengers that your opponent has to answer. So by the time you get to the Starhawk, instead of them having a bunch of removal, the idea is that they've already used a bunch of the removal, so maybe they don't have a clean answer to the Starhawk. Issue 2. The Starhawk needs cards to combo off with. You will already be running Relentlesses and Devastators and Avengers. You don't need to like change your deck at all to include like a higher cost curve. It comes naturally, so you're more than likely going to have the cards to like profit off of the Starhawk. That also helps negate problem 3. You play the Starhawk down and claim. If they don't have a clean answer, you can throw Relentless down on your next turn for 4 resources. Then they most likely can't deal with the Starhawk, and you play the Devastator out for 5 resources. And now your board is Starhawk, Relentless, Devastator, and it's just game over. The problem I see with Piet is it might be hard for him to close out games because he's only going to be able to play 1 card at a time. And if he's going up against these grindier matchups against like a Thrawn Green or something like that, playing 1 card a turn is really going to start biting you in the ass. If you can get a Starhawk out and then a Relentless Devastator, that is just a game-winning card in and of itself. I'm trying to see ahead here. I think we might start seeing Piets later on include a Starhawk or 2, as like a game finisher. I really think in Piet, Starhawk is a 4-star card. I think it's going to go really, really well in Piet, and it wouldn't surprise me if they start including 1 or 2 of, just because it's going to be so insane. So if you haven't noticed, Green Hero is one of my favorite color combinations. I'm really high on these cards, so you can see that there's 3 5-star cards, 3 4-star cards, and 3 3-star cards. So that's like 9 meta relevant cards that I'm predicting that Green Hero is going to get. And that's probably not true. It wouldn't surprise me if the Starhawk, the Raddus, Leia, Poe are all like 2 or 1-star cards. I don't see a world where Luke, Red Leader, and Chewbacca aren't just groundbreaking. Like maybe one of them drops to 4 stars, but they just seem so insane. It's gonna really help Green Hero, even in like aggro and control matchups. And maybe, you know, the Phoenix Squadron A-Wing and the Resistance Blue Squadron, maybe they're more irrelevant and they're not as useful as I'm thinking they are. It's just that Green Hero is like hurting for like decent early game ships. And those are some pretty decent early game ships. So I can see Green Hero decks trying to incorporate them. And then, you know, you got your trash at the bottom that still Snap Wexley and the Resistance Fleet Commander. They could increase in playability if we start getting Resistance cards. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you've been liking the content I've been posting, maybe consider subscribing and like leaving a comment letting me know other videos that you'd like me to make after I'm done with the Jump to Lightspeed card reviews. I have some thoughts on top 10 lists and like deck guides for all the leaders. So yeah, leave a comment, let me know your thoughts on my rankings, let me know thoughts on videos that you'd like to see, and see ya.